Welcome to another week of the Mops and Mo's podcast. We're joined this week by none other than Alex. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming. Before we hit record, you mentioned the Pentagon pizza report. I don't know what that is. Explain.
I'm a little disappointed that you don't know
Well,
what
I'm
it
going to
is.
go, actually, as you're doing this, I'm going to go.
It's a fairly simple phenomenon. People who pay attention to the news know that things have been a little chaotic recently. And there are various ways to know what's going on or get behind the scenes on potentially classified stuff. And the Pentagon Pizza Report is an example of absolutely fantastic OSINT, or open source intelligence. And all it does is monitor how busy pizza places are in close proximity to the Pentagon. And when it spikes, when they get really, really busy, it's a great indication that people at the Pentagon are working overtime. Something crazy's going on. And it's a good way to predict geopolitical stuff going on.
That is so true.
With the latest situation in Iran, people were able to predict some of that using Domino's. There's a couple other popular ones. I can't remember the name of the Capitol Hill pizza place or whatever it's called. We the Pizza, I think. Yeah.
I'm reading a headline that says Pentagon's secret pizza meter accurately predicted 21 global crises since 1983.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And then this comment says, it's not a crisis, it's DiGiorno. Which is pretty funny. I'm
actually curious. We have listeners to the podcast at the Pentagon, a decent number of them. If you're one of those people, let us know which is the best pizza place near the Pentagon. Which is how do we, because I know the pizza report monitors several different places. 2 of them are Domino's locations, I think. Is We the Pizza better than Domino's? I don't know. I want to know from people who've been there and done that and been the cause of
the rules.
Pentagon pizza incidents.
This AI picture of the Pentagon has 4 sides.
That's pretty dumb.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. This is actually pretty interesting. Have you heard of the Waffle House meter?
That's the way for tracking hurricanes, right?
It's what is it?
Because they refuse to close. Yeah.
Waffle House index. Yep. 24-hour, 365-day a week service. If it's completely closed, that's a red index.
There is a fascinating, this is not either Waffle House or pizza, but when they're categorizing tornado intensities, one of the ways they do that is they go out after the tornado and look at how much damage it did to categorize it. So it's retroactive. And there was a problem a few months ago where it tore through an Amish area. And the problem was they got out there 24, 48 hours after the tornado had gone through and the Amish had already rebuilt. They had fully re-erected stuff that had been ripped apart, so they were not able to figure out the actual intensity of the tornado.
Speaking of...
If you have a transition here, I'll be blown away.
Just wait for this one. Speaking of religious-oriented sects, communities, biblical references, Nazareth Syndrome.
That was a pretty strong reach there to connect Nazareth Syndrome to Amish.
No, Amish people are very faith-based. The Nazareth Syndrome is a reference to the Bible. The Bible is the Amish and, Christianity's book. So there you go.
Okay. Sure. If you say so.
Divine.
I still think it's a reach.
Transition.
Yeah. So you may be wondering why I brought you here today. People on the Instagram will be familiar. I've been listening. Yeah, you said I was the guest here. Now you're the guest.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
People on the Mops and Mo's Instagram, and I think I also put it on LinkedIn as well for a slightly different vibe of a conversation over there, will know that I've been talking about Nazareth Syndrome recently. People who have followed the page for a long time will know that is a rare repost of content for me. I don't often recycle content. I honestly have been meaning to recycle content more because there's a lot of good stuff that people haven't seen because it's years old now. But I brought this one back. And I do have to give credit before we dive into the topic. John Clancy, and I'm not sure, I think he might be a coach at Fort Bragg, actually. He's coached at a few different places, collegiate, tactical, different things. Former Army guy himself. He was I think, artillery officer, maybe. I'm not sure.
Which means he's not a combat MOS, as we know.
Yeah, we did learn that. Well, he might have been infantry, though, so I don't know.
Then he would be a combat MOS,
Yeah. Conversation for another day on what qualifies as a combat MOS for PT test standards. Sorry for not knowing your branch, John. But he introduced me to the topic. It was at NSCA Tactical, I gave a presentation. He came up to the mic, asked a question based on Nazareth Syndrome, and that's where I learned about it. And I have gone back to it many times since then. So a super useful framework for like reminding yourself that sometimes the best ideas come from inside the organization, and it's easy to overlook those in favor of outside perspectives. And we'll talk about why that is. It's just kind of human nature. You'll hear this plenty of times. No one's a prophet in their own home, yada, yada. Like parents know that kids will like accept a message from somebody else more readily than they'll accept it from their own parent sometimes. For those who want like the original biblical reference, we're looking at Luke chapter 4, 14 through 30. But the short version is, whether you're religious or not. Go ahead.
I was going to say,
a few different ones.
Yeah, you mentioned Luke, not to turn this into a Bible podcast, but I've also got John 1, chapter 46. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? And then Mark 6, chapter 6, verse 4. A prophet is not without honor except in his own town.
Yeah. So the phenomenon, whether you're religious or not, hardly really matters here. But the idea is that Jesus was rejected when he came to his own hometown because to other places, he's this prophet who comes sharing this message. To his hometown, that's just the guy we already know. He's the carpenter. Why should we care about what he says? And this plays out in, we've already noted families, but workplaces especially, where leaders might be more receptive to an outside expert than their own people, even though their own people have a better understanding of what's actually going on in their particular situation, organization, whatever. And we can think about this two ways. One is to remind leaders to like listen to your people, like make sure you have the kind of community at work where people can speak up and say what's dumb, but also you can take advantage of it when you know that is going on. If you're trying to get a message across to leaders above you, maybe bringing in an external voice to explain it might help it get into their heads a little easier than you saying the same things over and over and over again.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's anything we haven't touched on. Just some buzzwords here. The bias of familiarity is a good way to think about Nazareth syndrome, just undervaluing those closest to you. You mentioned Jesus. I think the definition I came across, and I know you already kind of touched on this, but it's a phenomenon where somebody is undervalued or dismissed in they use the phrase hometown, but just familiar environment, despite being respected or accomplished elsewhere, which I think that last part is probably the most relevant to some of the points we've got here that we're going to run through. But like you mentioned, just maybe taking stock of those around you and recognizing folks that are actually quite accomplished in areas that may not necessarily be in your own hometown, so to speak. And then figuring out how you can bring those folks to the fore. Go ahead.
I'll add a quick one too, which is that in business settings in particular, or corporate settings, or the military does this to a certain degree, I think it's worth remembering when you're talking to people that are inside the organization, it's not fake. You're dealing with the real issues, the real problems. You're not pretending, you're not putting on a show. When you talk to someone outside the organization, you're getting sales. That person is not down in the mud with you, figuring out the problems in the crappy reality you deal with. They're painting you a picture that is a sales pitch. They're trying to make things sound good. You're getting their highlight reel rather than their behind the scenes. And that's kind of what's at the root of why this phenomenon is so strong. It's not Nazareth syndrome by any means, but something I try to remind people when we talk about social media is that when you're on social media, you inherently and subconsciously comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, the things they have curated to show you to make their life look as good as possible. That's also true with products and services. When you're dealing with someone who works for you, you are behind the scenes, you are seeing how it actually works. When you are dealing with somebody who's trying to do business with you in the future or offer you a product or something like that, you are dealing with their highlight reel, what they wanted to show you. Just stuff to keep in mind.
Shall we talk about human performance?
Yeah, where do you want to start? Do you want to dive in with something spicy or ease into it?
No, let's go spicy. So for some context here, I'll take the bullet, I guess. You posted the Nazareth post, was that earlier this week? This week being kind of middle of June as we're recording. And I commented to you that this sounds a lot like what we see in H2F, specific to the company folks know of as Apex Path. But I don't necessarily think Apex is the only culprit, and maybe culprit's the wrong word. But I think as people are listening to this, you can probably recognize, if you've been inside of military human performance for some time at different levels, soft, conventional, what have you, you've probably seen examples of this and can, very quickly bring something to mind. But the Apex H2F example I will mention specifically because we saw it play out literally in the Army 250 celebration that was going on up in DC. So for context, without maybe compromising myself or diving too far into the weeds, H2F, as everybody knows, is the Army's program of record for human performance. So whether you are an officially resourced unit is the phrasing we use, or whether you are kind of a DIY, throw together some staff type unit, H2F is kind of the branded yellow pentagon version of human performance that the Army is using. It is civilians, contractors, active duty folks, subject matter experts from literally all over, certainly the country, maybe even the world now that we're going international with it. The Army's put a lot of time, money, effort, resources into this, and it's a huge thing. But as we all know, folks listening to this, Alex and I very intimately know this, program has seen some budget cuts. It's seen some slashing to the resources, some staffing adjustments over the years. And what's been interesting is that there's always, and this is just my perspective, my opinion, there's always been sort of a key cohort of leaders that have done a good job of highlighting this program. But outside of that key cohort, the broader H2F idea has always been up against external contracting. Would that be how you would phrase that? External resources. What I mean by that is that, and I'll use Army 250 here as an example for folks that are unfamiliar, the Army's 200th birthday up in DC, they had the big parade. They had a big kind of, is festival the right word? Fitness event. And instead of using that as an opportunity to highlight this program, maybe bring up some strength coaches, some folks from the different brigades that have these types of resources, and showcase this Army, massive investment, we contracted that out to another company to run the workout, to be in front of the cameras, to talk to the media. So I don't necessarily think that is in isolation a bad thing. I mean, a good workout's a good workout, but it was just interesting to me when you posted the Nazareth Syndrome thing. The Army has it has literally invested millions and millions into a plethora of subject matter experts that could have done a phenomenal job as an organic Army
and
resource.
have done a phenomenal job.
I
just want to point out, it's as things get more senior and the optics change, where this starts to play in more and more.
Mm-hmm.
The 250th is an example, but I think there's an even better example with the best squad competition, where
explain that one to folks.
As each unit did their internal best squad competition to find out who their people were and proceed to a higher level, units that had H2F was heavily involved in that, both preparing people and assisting with designing fitness components of the actual competitions. And it was H2F led all the way up until the core level. And as I understand it, thanks to the DMs, won't name anybody here, I promise, but H2F was involved in the planning process for the Army best squad competition, having the fitness event be run by H2F. They were in the initial planning meetings. It was the same person who did it at the core level. And then all of a sudden, they were just kind of uninvited from the planning meetings. And when the event actually went down, once again, it's Apex Path. They get the contract. We're talking, I think, a 6-figure number to run a workout. And it's true. It depends on what you want, right? I'm not saying we should never contract out for things. You want a show, and certain organizations are comfortable putting on a show in the fitness world. Looking at you, CrossFit. But it depends. Are you trying to showcase what the Army does with the Army systems, or are you trying to bring in outside people? And I would be a little less adversarial. Again, going to the DMs, people told me why can't we all just get along? Why can't the H2F people and the Apex people just partner up and show each other what they do and work together? And that would be great if it was not just the reality that there is conflict on the ground, where H2F folks are being told to go away and being told that they need to follow this. And it very much is an adversarial thing, whether we all want to get along or not.
Yeah, and it's hard not to shoot ourselves in the foot here, because there is stuff that we experience both through the Mops and Mo's channels. You mentioned the DMs, and then also just through kind of professional work environments. But I think specific, again, to the conversation that we're having about Nazareth Syndrome, in my opinion, just because I'm confronted with it every day, this is a classic example of what Nazareth Syndrome is, which is to say that, again, H2F is, I guess you could still say it's like the new bright and shiny thing, even though it's been around for a couple of years, but it's still growing. I mean, it's a program that is growing. It has survived the kind of Doge craziness of the last few months. Hiring is open again. Like it's a growing program.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Look at you guys. I did see a few positions listed.
Yeah.
So clearly.
Look at us.
I can't hire right now. So if you could throw me some of that hiring freeze exemption, that'd be great.
Thaw your freeze, as it were.
Yeah. I do. Before we go on, it's worth noting the fact that H2F is still growing is literally where Apex Path got their foot in the door. It was because 18th Airborne Corps had the haves and have-nots across the organization. They were looking at like all these units at Fort Bragg, getting resources, Fort Drum, all this stuff. But then you have 3rd ID hanging out at Fort Stewart, not getting these resources. They said, well, like we don't want one of our divisions over here to not have anything while our other divisions are getting all sorts of resources. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to contract for something that can provide this while we wait for H2F resources to come.
Yeah.
Not to get like too far into the weeds, also because I don't want to go to jail or get sued or whatever. But if you took the amount spent, because what Apex Path has offered is bluntly a whole bunch of one-day versions of CrossFit Level 1, where you just expose a whole bunch of people to their preferred movement patterns. And then after that, you just get like generic CrossFit style workout of the day stuff on an app. That's what it is. That's the whole thing. If you'd taken the amount of money that cost the Army to do and invested it in just accelerating the H2F implementation, like if we could get headquarters to talk to each other, or even just like hiring people, right? Which is the same as accelerating H2F, I guess. You hire your own people outside H2F, you hire your own people inside H2F. But like, you could have experts that could create like contextually relevant training based on the actual mission, based on the actual fitness levels of the units, adjusted for what's going on. You could do that. It's not as sexy as like calling somebody in and just getting a product. Like you have to actually like, again, highlight reel versus behind the scenes. You have to get in the weeds.
You may not get a t-shirt.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know, there's probably future conversations about some of this stuff, but I think more broadly, we've talked about this in the special operations community as well, but a lot of units, even at the highest levels, and it may even be worse at the highest levels because you have a lot of funding and anonymity, but you see a lot of examples of soldiers who have access to human performance staff going outside of the organization to, buy programming, consult with, dietitians, physical therapy, maybe less so, but certainly with the programming piece. And I think the lesson maybe that I would put out there is that, and we'll use H2F again as an example, like if you're a soldier who has access to these resources, you may not like the idea of H2F as a brand, and that's fine. But the coach that's down the hall from you is not the H2F brand. He or she is a subject matter expert in strength and conditioning, human performance, whatever. So I would just encourage folks, even if you don't like H2F just because it's an Army thing and you don't like Army things, that's fine. That doesn't mean that the guy or gal sitting down the hall, when you go to talk to them, has to go to a certain manual and pull out a certain program because the Army said that's the one. Like, all these folks are willing to work with you. That's not to say that there aren't some bad apples out there. And I put that beyond just H2F. I mean, Air Force, Army, Navy, Marine Corps. There's going to be bad coaches. That's just the nature of these things. But if you have chosen not to engage with them at all, just because you think that they are part of this like big Army brand, just try having a conversation, express what you're looking for. And I guarantee, 9 times out of 10, those coaches will have the level of education and expertise to provide something that will work for you, and it will cost you a whole lot less, i.e. it's a whole lot less than going out and paying for something online. And you will get that kind of personal touch that comes with having somebody who can watch you do the thing, adjust the thing, motivate you through the thing, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll step off my pedestal now and turn it back over to you.
Team, this episode of Mops and Mo's is brought to you by Train Heroic. Train Heroic is a reliable, well-designed platform for programming, tracking, and communicating with athletes. If you've been with us for any length of time, you will know that Train Heroic is the platform that we use to power our own training, long and strong, which you can find at our website, mopsandmos.com. If you're looking for a solid platform to support your own coaching, whether it's your full-time role or a side hustle, Train Heroic is definitely worth checking out. You can use the link in any of our show notes, you can find it in our newsletter, or you can head to our website, mopsandmos.com/training to get your first week for free.
I mean, two bonus examples come to mind. One is, even at the highest levels, this is still absolutely a problem. How many pro athletes have their own trainers they like to go to rather than the trainers available to their team? I mean, like, not to get into like strength and conditioning memes, but there are pro athletes who train with Joel Seedman over the strength and conditioning staff they have. You've seen the guy who's all about the 90-degree stuff. Posts a lot of really stupid looking exercises on Instagram.
It almost seems like the stupider you are online, the more likely you are to get money from people with
sales, man. Yeah. You gotta do some funky stuff. But I'll provide a more personal example. And I don't know what the solution is here. I just remember realizing this one day several years ago. We have had Riley Kelleher on the podcast. He's a fantastic coach up in Alaska. Been crushing the cardio stuff lately, like in a really big way. Did the Norwegian Ruck March with the guys just this past day or two. Finished with like over an hour to spare. Absolutely crushing it for a guy who like also lifts crazy heavy weight. But I remember when I was teaching Master Fitness Trainer, traveling up to Alaska for a couple weeks to teach it. If you put the numbers together on what it costs for 5 people to go TDY to Alaska for 2 weeks, lodging, food, flights, rental cars, everything, we could just hired another coach. Like there could have been another Riley in Alaska for that price. So like it's a classic Nazareth situation. Like it's sometimes easier to pay for like a couple days or a week or 2 weeks of like dedicated, intense focus from a group of people and like shell out for it. That's easier than hiring people permanently. But I mean, I liked teaching that course. I thought it was fun, but I will not pretend that the value we added being there teaching a class for 2 weeks, it comes even close to the value you could have gotten having a coach permanently, right? That whole year. So I don't know. Maybe that's a critique of MTTs in general. Training's still good. There's reasons to do things like that. But one thing I've learned being in the federal system is sometimes how administratively easy something is more important than the number of dollars it costs. We spend way more than things are worth on things that are just easy to purchase because the system already exists for it. This might be a pretty good example of that, where we're spending crazy money. Constant issue with H2F, right? Like, what's the biggest hurdle to increasing the quality of the program for H2F and like retaining quality people? It's paying coaches more. We can find money for these awesome external services that probably pay their people pretty well. What if we found that money and just paid our coaches a little better?
Well, I mean, then you're getting into like contracting.
Sure are, but that's what we're also using contracting to get these services. It's the same system.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about how not to win over leaders.
Yeah. So I'm not going to name names here.
It's like the third time you've said that.
I get a lot of messages and I don't like to share the things people tell me unless I have permission from them to share it. Got a particular message last week. Really good one, actually. Like really good message about what's going on at Fort Stewart with H2F implementation. And as I've said, there's some adversarial stuff going on the ground between H2F and Apex. And credit where it's due, I think Apex has been much better at sales, especially to senior leaders, than H2F has been. And I say that as a guy who has like worked with H2F and helped sell it, not as well as they did, clearly. But I think if you're trying to make the case for why H2F is better, I'll tell you a few things that are not going to succeed, especially when you're talking to like brigade commanders and higher. If you start talking about periodization, you've probably lost them already. If you start talking about how like soldiers need more recovery and don't need to be working as hard, you're probably losing them. Yeah, to the point that when I taught Master Fitness Trainer, we weren't even calling active recovery days. You just come up with a different name that sounds more tactical and intense, right? Like, you just got to know what leaders want and what they like. I'd seen a few. There's like mobility stuff. There's a few ways to do it that sell it.
Warrior yoga. I think Mark Devine.
What's the recovery thing now? TMAR M or something? Tactical mobility, active recovery. You gotta give it a sexy name.
That's a thing.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't made it to you.
Tactical mobility, active recovery.
Yeah, TMAR.
TMAR M. Wow, you're right. TMAR M stands for tactical mobility, active recovery, and mindfulness. Huh. This is a thing. Sorry, not to like derail it. There's some
It's
pretty
just
funny,
yoga, man. Don't worry about it.
But that's a great point. Like, what are we doing? I mean, fuck it, whatever. Keep knocking on Apex. It's just CrossFit. Like,
yeah.
And I think that's the thing.
It's literally CrossFit, for the record. Like, as we say, we don't say that as like an exaggeration.
You can see stuff online.
When they did the Army 250th birthday workout event, like Dave Castro was there, and like CrossFit seminar staff were there, and like Rogue was there.
The thing.
I mean, it just is CrossFit. Yeah.
I'm gonna make jazz music here for a second. Like, by the way, went to the Dizzy Gillespie big band show the other night in Boone. I think it was sick.
Speaking of jazz
music. No, but like, here's the thing that is frustrating, and other folks might have thoughts on this. They might hate me. I don't know, whatever. Senior leaders want sexiness. They don't care. Well, I shouldn't say they don't care, but like, what works in human performance, if you've been listening to us talk for any period of time, you will hopefully know that both you and I enjoy and understand that it's the basics. It's the basics done well, consistently, and then surrounded by habit forming, behavior modification, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really boring. And it takes a long time. But the results, like 10 out of 10 times, that will work. That's not sexy.
Nope.
What sells is workouts of the day, leaderboards, competitions, fire breathers, big biceps. I say that because if you look at this screenshot of the Army 250 with the, like, there's just biceps everywhere. And so I don't know if this is like a Nazareth Syndrome reference or what, but it's like, if you're so focused on the bright, shiny thing without recognizing that, like, if you have ice cream for every meal, you're going to end up killing yourself. You got to have your vegetables like pretty consistently. I don't know where I'm going with that, but it just seems that the higher up you get, the more the demand increases for flash in the pan, sexiness, competition, workout of the day, lethality. I'm just throwing buzzwords out there, but
it's also, I'll do like a really weird tangent that I did not expect to bring up in this episode, but
we're making jazz music.
It was a moment of realization for me as a lieutenant for how different things are at senior levels. And honestly, this phenomenon was to some degree already the case for a lieutenant, but I was working on battalion staff. For people who are not familiar with how the Army works, when you're evaluated professionally, when you get your officer evaluation, and that determines whether you're getting promoted and what jobs you get and all these important things for your career, the most important thing on there is how your senior rater evaluates you. And your senior rater is essentially your commander's commander most of the time. It's like the person 2 layers above you in the supervisory chain. Person 2 layers above a battalion commander is a division commander. Battalion commanders and division commanders don't see each other that often. Like, they don't see what the in the weeds stuff is. They get momentary glimpses at key moments that are likely stressful moments, to be honest, of how things are going. Like, this mattered to me because some of the cheesy nonsense I did at the time involved like creating events for the battalion, and sometimes these events get in the post newspaper or on the division Facebook page or whatever. And the division commander might never have seen the event or known what was going on in the battalion, but he sure as hell saw the Post newspaper, and he sure as hell saw his division's Facebook page. It's those like momentary, quick impression type of things that determine how senior leaders' careers go. Like having the exact right image at the key moment where somebody sees it and forms a good impression of them and their leadership and their organization. So at low levels, when you're working with the guys who are like where the rubber meets the road, where the real work happens, it is all about the fundamentals and the day-to-day and the making the calendar work around all the competing demands. But the higher you get, the more it is about amazing first impressions, salesmanship, excitement, having things look sexy, mixing in the right buzzwords, your lethalities, your readiness, whatever. It's a different game at a higher level. And I think that's part of the problem, like that's part of this Nazareth Syndrome thing, is because it's very much influenced by those impressions people have. But it's also just part of like, how do you sell a program, is realizing you have to communicate in different ways to different echelons.
You think that holds true for non-military
100%
stuff? Probably.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about guest speakers. I know we kind of added this in last minute before we recorded.
Yeah,
but
I threw it on the sheet because I've thought about this one a lot. I might be a guest speaker at a couple of things coming up soon.
Hey, you're qualified.
Well, listen, I'm not as qualified as the people I'll be speaking to, which is almost always true whenever I'm speaking to an audience. I think we've seen this a lot. H2F is not the only space where this happens, but H2F has been very guilty of it. I'm some asshole with a podcast, right? Like that's what I am. Like I guess I have a day job and I got to do the Army Reserve thing and stuff. But like when people on the internet know who I am, they know it because I'm some asshole with a podcast. And that occasionally leads to me being like sought out for my opinion on things or like treated as some kind of expert. Listen, if you're in a unit that has H2F staff, most of that staff is almost certainly more qualified than me. And like the lead for your brigade is absolutely more qualified than me in like 100% of cases, right? And it can be, it's easy to overlook that because you might know them. But like when you, and I don't think they take it personally, right? But like when you call in an outside expert to speak to your experts, you have to make sure you're not insulting your experts when you do that, right? Like if you bring in somebody who's like less qualified than they are, it sends a message to them. And so like this is me like preemptively apologizing. So if you see me come in as a guest speaker in your space sometime in the next like 6 months or something like that, I recognize that every time I speak, a lot of people in the audience are probably more qualified to be the one speaking than I am.
That's why I don't like conferences.
One day I'm going to get you to a conference, man.
No, I know. Say that's somewhat tongue in cheek, but I have seen this play out. And H2F is an interesting example because we haven't really talked about this, but like the branding of H2F, like is it fair to say it's like an open source? Although I think they are trademarking
I think it just got trademarked.
Trademarking the logo. But what you see in this space, because of how big H2F is you see a lot of things being branded and labeled as H2F when they may not be. And for me, I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but like H2F for me has always been a like officially resourced unit with the staff and the program and the logo and the pillars and the thing. And then kind of tangentially, you have what we've mentioned before, the non-resourced units that are creating their own version of H2F, but they still exist within that context of embedded performance folks within a brigade or whatever level you're working in. Outside of that, though, you see a lot of other smaller conferences or outsourced companies. We mentioned Apex. I mean, these folks will go around saying that they are H2F. I don't know if it's malicious necessarily, but what you end up doing is diluting the brand. And then when you end up at these conferences, like you mentioned, you have somebody speaking to, in the H2F example, a crowd of no shit experts because they do it every day. And they're supposed to listen and hear this person talk about how to do X, Y, and Z when that person speaking has never actually done X, Y, and Z. I'm not saying you're that person in this example, but H2F
I've been in the room when that happens.
Yeah, and H2F, like I said, this happens kind of in a lot of places, but H2F is just an interesting one because there's a brand, a logo, like a whole thing associated with it that kind of gets tossed everywhere.
I'll do a quick shout out another throwback to an old episode. We had Mike Irwin from Team Red, White, and Blue on the podcast years ago at this point.
God,
when I was like, one of the volunteering roles I had is I was in like a leadership position for the Colorado Springs chapter of Team Red, White, and Blue. And if you're in one of those like official volunteer positions, like you're not quite staff, but you like have a real role, you get an email address, all that stuff. And one of the things you get shown is the brand guidelines, right? Like there's a booklet, whatever. It's not very long, but it shows you like, this is the logo. You can only put the logo on these colors. You can't change it in any of the following ways. If the background is going to be light, you have to use this version of the logo. If the background is going to be dark, you have to use this version of the logo. It can only have this text under it. You can't add text to it. You can't change the name. You can't change the font. It has to be this font. This is all the stuff so that we are consistent about our branding. Meanwhile, you run around human performance programs, and for very valid reasons, people are creating their own local versions of it where all that stuff gets thrown out the window and you get different names, even though it's under the same umbrella program. You get different logos, you get different all sorts of things. And part of it's because like that guidance hasn't been established.
Yeah.
But part of it is because you want it to be unit owned and locally relevant. Like if your brigade has a certain culture, mascot, message, whatever, you want it to tie in with that's all valid. But as a result, and I think this is true of a lot of programs in the military in general, you completely lose control of the message, the brand, the image, all that stuff.
I don't think people fully understand the importance and impact of branding and just marketing and salesmanship in general. And this ties into the Nazareth Syndrome thing, because like we said at the top, like the sexiness is what's going to sell. And I see this a lot with embedded teams. If you don't have a certain je ne sais quoi, a certain sexiness about your program, you're going to have a hard time competing for brain space with somebody who's going to make decisions involving where money is spent, resources or diverged, whatever. The sexiness though is marketing. It is branding. It is sales. So don't assume that just because you represent, in our case, Big Army H2F or Thor 3 or HPO or WS, whatever your thing is, don't assume that just because you represent that boom, job done. You have to market yourself, sell yourself, brand yourself. And then, like you said, you have to put some conditions around that so that it doesn't just get watered down and become monotonous. I mean, we've seen this happen. I think everybody can think of a program, whatever branch you're in, there's going to be some program that got kanked years ago because the brand just kind of fell by the wayside and it just became another military thing. It lost its sexiness. And I think that's why we see this Nazareth Syndrome happen so frequently in this space, is because it is quite easy to package up. We keep talking about CrossFit, but like you package up that methodology, you slap a cool brand on it, you have a cool logo, you put some fit dudes behind it. And it's easy to sell that to somebody because they don't necessarily have the time or energy to do the research and see what they have available to them within their own formation. They just say, cool, yeah, like what you got going on, get in here, run the workout. So if you're not selling yourself, there's probably some cool phrase I could use there, but.
Well, two important notes on selling yourself that we've like not quite talked about in this conversation yet that I think are relevant. One is this helps underline the potential competitive advantage that somebody who has served in the military before becoming a coach, especially if that service was at like a higher level, special operations, something, I think, and even if it's not special operations, just speaking the language is a huge advantage because it helps you sell. You know what leaders care about. You know how they talk. You know the vocabulary. That's a huge one. And then one that for whatever reason, it blows up on like LinkedIn once a year or so is the whole conversation about do coaches have to be fit? Do human performance professionals have to look the part? And this is a perfect example of one of the many reasons why you don't have to look the part. There are certainly coaches out there doing great work who don't,
think so?
and physical therapists and athletic trainers and dietitians. There's a bunch of valid reasons. There are people who were amazing and are past their prime now and don't really care about it anymore. There are people who have a variety of disabilities. I mean, look at the NFL, man. There are NFL coaches who are just not fit at all and like weren't particularly good players in their own right.
Andy Reid.
There are examples of it. So clearly you don't have to, but you probably should. You are probably not the exception. It would really help you in terms of selling yourself and being taken seriously if you just were better at the things you're trying to convince these people to work on than they currently are. And like Drew mentioned, having lots of biceps, right? Like,
yeah, more than 2.
The way the shirts fit matters. Like sometimes it's build your biceps, sometimes it's buy a smaller shirt, but
a combination of both, really. Okay, we've got in here external solutions to the military's human performance problems. I think I know where this is going. I love that force plates.
I think we've hit this enough in previous episodes that we don't have to spend a ton of time on it here. But this is loosely associated with Nazareth Syndrome. But there's this idea that we can solve leadership and culture problems with external resources. And you'll hear people making an awful lot of promises about what their product can do. And you're right, I put a few examples on here: force plates, wearables, things like that. I think...
Isn't H2F an external solution to the military's human performance problems?
To some degree.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little more organic than that, as in it's actually part of the organization.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's safe to say, maybe this is biased, I don't know, but an external solution that has become an internal solution. Anyway, keep going.
Just be wary of salesmanship is really the only message here. In particular with the force plates thing and the wearables thing, I think if you're talking to somebody who's an honest broker in that space, they will tell you that those systems collect data and that is the end of what they do. Wearables don't make people fitter. Force plates don't prevent injuries. They just collect data. So they're only useful in 2 situations. You have a practitioner who's going to use that data to make better decisions, or you have an intrinsically motivated user of the system who's going to modify their behavior based on the data that's coming from it. If you don't have one of those 2 things, all you're doing is creating data for data's sake.
Would you call it, well, I don't know, maybe that's not Nazareth Syndrome. I'm just thinking of the classic example of, okay, like let's use sleep. Instead of taking the time to modify the path dependency based battle rhythm schedule, whatever, to actually address sleep, we'll just go and buy the ring that tells us sleep data. Would you consider that Nazareth Syndrome?
I don't think it's literally Nazareth Syndrome. I don't think it is Nazareth Syndrome, but it is
Jerusalem Syndrome.
It's certainly related. It is a
Bethlehem
phenomenon that is tied in. Like,
yeah,
just the idea. It ties to. I think it ties more closely to something I talk about a lot, but I haven't quite figured out a way to present on the podcast yet. I think, which is like internal versus external locus of control. Whether you believe that the outcomes you experience in life are because of things you control or because of things that just happen to you. I think there's a lot of this in the human performance space. If you really, really believe that your shoes make that much of a difference in your running, you probably have a pretty external locus of control.
Sure.
I think your shoes are barely relevant. Your training makes the most difference in your running. Certainly shoes play a part and you should choose some good ones, but like, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, maybe we need a name for that, because I'm thinking of, there's a lot of examples now that I sit here and go through it, like just this idea that, I call it Fitbit syndrome. Instead of actually changing your habits, eating healthy, getting more sleep, working out effectively, you go and buy a Fitbit. It's like, well, maybe if we, my position on those things, wearables specifically, has always been like, sure, get that after you've optimized everything else that you have control over. So again, maybe Nazareth Syndrome, maybe not, but specific to some of these that you listed here, wearables, force plates, special programs, like, and sleep is the one I keep coming back to. Like, until you have actually addressed the root cause of the problem, you don't need a thing to just give you a prettier picture of the problem. I don't know. I'll come up with a name for that. I'll find another Middle Eastern city that we can use. I'm gonna turn you loose here though, because I think this is what kind of started this whole thing, was the direct commissioning of the tech executives. Huge diversion here from human performance folks, but I know that this hit home for you, so I'll let you I'll let you go.
I had thoughts on this one, and it is what very directly sparked me thinking back to Nazareth Syndrome. You were the one who connected it to the H2F issues later. I was not actually thinking about H2F when I was...
I think I just sent you the word apex.
Yeah. And as a disclaimer for all the people who are about to send me messages and emails and things like that, I am aware that direct commissioning people with industry experience into the military is not without precedent. We have done things like this, most notably during World War II. And I think there are situations where it could make a ton of sense. I absolutely think so. I have paid enough attention to like recent military history to know that the logistics architecture that was put in place for Iraq and Afghanistan was largely built by reservists and National Guard members whose day jobs were with companies like FedEx and UPS and things like that. People can bring expertise from other spaces to the military and add a ton of value, and there are ways to leverage that. So I don't think we should completely throw out like direct commissioning people based on unique credentials that they can bring to the Army. However, there were a couple red flags tied to this whole thing. And if you're not familiar, on the Army's birthday, as part of the whole festivities around the 250, the Army commissioned 4 executives from tech companies as lieutenant colonels. They don't have to go to basic training. They go through an expedited version of the direct commission course. They have to take a couple classes, and then they're going to be part of Detachment 201, which will be an innovation cell for the Army. They still work at Meta, Palantir, and OpenAI full-time in their executive positions, but now they're in the Army Reserve, directly to lieutenant colonel, leading innovation work. In theory, it's to accelerate the military's process of intelligently implementing various software solutions, AI solutions, things like that. That is the concept. That's the idea. Why do I have doubts about it? One is there are lots of reservists, National Guard members, active duty people who had careers in corporate settings before they joined. A million examples of people who have been exposed to tech that is certainly better than DTS, IPS-A, all these things we say are problems that we want to modernize and fix. I don't think you need the chief technical officer of a leading AI firm in uniform. I think you need somebody who understands how the acquisition system is broken. And I think there are a lot of people in our organization already who understand how it's broken and aren't empowered to fix the problems. And part of that is because you have to change laws to solve these problems. And changing laws is hard. And commissioning cool tech executives is, compared to changing laws, a little bit easier. Another red flag for me is that like 3 days after we commissioned 2 senior executives from OpenAI, and not we, the Army, but we, the DoD, awarded OpenAI a $200 million contract that just tells them to like prototype ways the Army can utilize, or the DoD can utilize AI better, right? It's not for a specific product. It's not for a specific solution. It's just $200 million to like go prototype stuff. Why did we need to commission 2 people straight to lieutenant colonel over all these other people with technical expertise that are already in our organization if we were still going to pay the same company $200 million to just do the thing anyway? I don't know. Like, I think there are problems that our own people could fix. And it brings me back to a concept I talk about a lot. And again, credit where it's due. When I left active duty, I spent some time interning at CHAMP, the Consortium for Health and Military Performance. And they've done some interesting research on what makes human performance teams effective, like what differentiates effective teams from ineffective teams. And what came out of a lot of that research is that psychological safety within the team is a driving determinant of success. Do people on the team feel safe enough to speak up when something is broken or wrong, or to present their idea for ways to do it better? And I think the best way to solve some of these Nazareth Syndrome issues is to create an environment where people can like raise their hand and say, hey, listen, the way we're doing this is really dumb. We should not do that. And I don't think you need tech executives wearing uniforms to solve some of those problems.
You think they're going to wear uniforms?
I mean, the pictures are pretty funny because you can tell they're not super comfortable wearing like Army combat uniform. And it's weird to see a lieutenant colonel with like no badges, tabs, patches, anything. It's pretty interesting.
If you get a $200 million contract, do you also collect like National Guard pay?
I mean, one would point out that like the company got the contract, not the people.
Sure.
And the company pays the people. Now, whether they get a bonus for helping secure that contract, who knows? And last one, and this is just me being kind of petty, but the same day OpenAI got the $200 million contract, they announced that they were creating OpenAI for government. And the woman leading OpenAI for government was previously chief of staff to the Secretary of the Army. The connections, it's not like 7 degrees of separation, it's a 1 degree of separation. Like these people all know each other and people are getting commissioned and winning multi-$100 million contracts. I just wonder, I am almost certain that there are some like really talented tech folks who are like sergeants and staff sergeants and captains and majors in the reserve and guard already. And how many of them are getting the opportunity to participate in innovation at this level? And it seems like you have to be, one, like senior enough and flashy enough, and two, your company already has to be doing millions and millions of dollars of work with the DoD before you get to just skip to lieutenant colonel.
The idea of OpenAI for the government is cool. I would just like if my internet would stay connected during the day, and if I could like change email settings without an admin password. But that would be nice.
Yeah,
sure. Or like, you know, get on a blog without getting blocked. But
I'm going to do this on the podcast, Drew. I've already told you this, like on Slack and in text messages and things like that.
On the website. Yep.
You got to remove the word blog from everything on our website so that people can access mopsandmos.com from work in the DoD.
Well,
sorry to all of you out there.
No, that's good. That's a great transition to a close because we've talked a lot about sales. You mentioned the website. Team, before we let you go, if you are unhappy with your embedded human performance team and you do want to spend money on programming outside of your, I'm kidding. That would make me such a douche, but we do.
No, before he continues, I have to say, we have had people from resource units reach out to us asking for coaching. And a few of you out there, I don't know how many like program directors listen and things like that, but if the first question I ask somebody who reaches out is, what unit are you in? Mm-hmm. And if they answer with a unit that I know has resources, every single time before any conversation with us, it's here. I'm going to connect you with, whether it's program director, physical therapist, coach, whoever. Like step one is always like leverage the resources you have. Like I know you found us because it's on social media and there's a podcast and stuff like that, and we're easy to reach out to. But like,
and we're sexy.
That's literally Nazareth Syndrome in action. Like you are reaching out to us instead of reaching out to somebody who is in the organization you are in. Mm-hmm. Take a second. Maybe they are pretty smart.
They could be. And for all of those programs, you owe us money because we're sending people back to you. Any stones unturned?
I mean, I think we might come back to some of these things in the future, but for now, I think we're good.
Awesome. Yeah, team. So just, again, takeaways, take a look at what you have available to you before you start going and looking elsewhere. Jesus was pretty cool, even though he was from Nazareth and the Nazarenes thought he was a normal guy. He actually had a lot going on. So with that in mind, guys, we will see you next week.
Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsandmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.